Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's do something totally different and let's paint some dresses. I pre-washed the dresses in textile detergent and then I allowed them to dry. They haven't been soaked in anything though. The dresses are a special order from my aunt. She asked me if I would paint these dresses for her and she actually sent me the dresses. She also drew a picture of what she wants painted on the dresses. And she would like to have 3 hearts painted up on the shoulder of the dresses and kind of trailing down a little bit. So I found the smallest size dress because she sent 1 size small, 3 size mediums, and a size large. Using the smallest size dress, I drew a heart that will fit up in the shoulder area. Then I drew 2 more hearts that will fit inside of the larger heart. Then using just plain paper, I made stencils for all 3 of the hearts. I used the smallest size dress because if the hearts will fit on the smallest size dress, they'll definitely fit on the larger ones. And I want all the dresses to look pretty close to the same. I started by using a washable marker and the stencils that I made and drawing all 3 of the hearts onto the shoulder portions of each one of the dry dresses. After I had all of the hearts drawn onto the dresses, I wanted to mix up my thickened dye. Since I haven't soaked the dresses in any kind of a soda ash solution, I'm going to add the soda ash directly to my dye. So I want to mix it up just right before I use it. So I'm going to mix each one of the colors for each individual dress right before I use them. If you haven't seen my video, which I posted for how to make thickened water or thickened chemical water, you're going to want to watch that because that shows my base for the thickened dye. I'll put a link to that video down below in the description. For each one of the dresses, I'm going to use 3 different colors. So I have 3 small silicone cups, which I'm going to mix the dye in. And there's a couple of different ways that you can mix dye. I'm going to show you the way which makes a little bit larger quantities of dye. I'll show you the way which I made smaller quantities of dye in just a few minutes. I'm mixing a 1/4 cup of each of the dye colors, and I'm starting by adding 1 teaspoon of soda ash to each one of the silicone containers. Then I took each cup to my utility sink and added just a little bit of water to dissolve the soda ash. I think you can probably skip this step though. I did when I mixed the smaller quantities. The first 3 colors that I'm going to use on the first dress are Daffodil, Deep Orange, and Parakeet, which are all Dharma Trading Company colors. Since I'm only mixing 1/4 of a cup of dye, I'm going to use a 1/2 teaspoon of each one of these colors. After I add each dye to the container, I'm going to mix it just a little bit with the soda ash to get some of the dye to dissolve. Now I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of the thickened chemical water into each one of the containers and mix it really well. I'm using my milk frother to make sure I have this mixed really well. Once I have the dye mixed, I'm going to use an old t-shirt and check the colors on top of this t-shirt. Then I'm going to transfer the dye into some smaller containers just so that they're a little easier for me to manage when I paint the dresses. So that was how you can mix larger quantities of dye. Let me show you how I ended up mixing smaller quantities of dye. Instead of using the silicone cups, I use the smaller shot glass plastic cups. Then I pour just a little bit of the thickened chemical water into the container. By the way, you want to make sure whenever you're mixing dye, since I stored the chemical water in my refrigerator, I'm taking it out of the refrigerator and letting it come up to room temperature before I mix dye with it. Otherwise, whenever I add soda ash in, a lot of times it will clump instead of actually mixing in. I'm using a stainless steel lab spoon, and this has like a micro scoop on one end, so it's a very, very tiny little spoon. And I'm just going to eyeball and put a little bit of dye into the container and just a little bit of soda ash into the container as well. I don't really measure each one of these items. Then I give it a really good stir to dissolve the soda ash and the dye, and then I test the color over on my test shirt. At this point, if it's too dark, I can add in a little bit more chemical water, or I can add in some more dye if I want it a little darker. Now, this method is not great if you want to try to ever reproduce this color. For these dresses, I'm going to use extremely small quantities, and so I don't want to waste a whole lot of dye. And I'm not going to have to replicate the color. Once you're happy with the dye color, you can start painting with it immediately. Because soda ash has been added to these dyes, they need to be used right away. Because the soda ash is going to cause the dye to begin to bond. It won't be good for very long if you leave it sitting around. That's why I'm only mixing up the dye for one dress at a time. So before I start painting on the dress, I need to prep it a little bit better. I'm going to stick some cardboard in between the two layers of fabric. And then to make sure the dress doesn't stick to the cardboard, I'm going to use some wax paper and place right under the area where I'm going to paint. You want to make sure you have something that is waterproof in between the two layers of fabric so that the paint or the dye doesn't soak through to the other side of the dress. The paintbrushes that I'm using for this project are kind of just all-purpose paintbrushes. They're mainly used for acrylic. I personally wouldn't use something like a watercolor brush because it's a little bit more delicate and fine. I also am using a variety of different sizes of paintbrushes. I purchased all my brushes at Michael's. I'm starting from the inside out on this project, so I'm painting the middle heart and moving outward to the larger heart. If you start in the middle and move out toward the outward edge, it makes it a little easier to keep your hand out of the paint that you've already painted. I went and got a paper towel and laid it on top of part of the dress just to make sure I didn't accidentally drop any of this dye on top of the white area. I think that was one of the most stressful things about doing these dresses, is making sure I didn't get any of the dye onto the white space. So I mentioned earlier that my aunt actually sent me these dresses to paint on, and they're 100% cotton dresses. They're a brand called Z Supply Essentials, and the tags were still attached, and it looks like she purchased them at a store called Shields. We don't have those in my area, so I'm not really very familiar with it. So for the most part, the dye is staying where I put it. It's not spreading out a lot and it's not bleeding a lot. However, when I get up next to the yellow, you'll notice there is a little bit of wicking of the parakeet over into the daffodil. Not a whole lot, but it does happen some. After I have all the hearts painted on the dress, I'm going to add on the tail. And I started rethinking the shape that I had kind of made that extra piece that was hanging down off of the heart. I didn't really want it to curve around on the chest area, so I thought I would make it a little more straight on the dress. So just ignore the other line I have drawn on. I'm going to put a small accent of each of the other two colors right next to this line as well. Okay, so now that I'm done with this dress, I'm going to set it aside and allow it to process. I left the dress for about 24 hours before I rinsed it. I added urea to my chemical water, so that will hopefully keep the dye from drying out before it has a chance to bond with the dress. So I mixed up the dye for the second dress and I'm starting to paint that one. The other dresses, I'm going to use Cotton Candy from Custom Colors, Crimson Rose from Dye Spin, and Pure Magenta from Dye Spin. Then on the next dress, I'm using English Violet from Dye Spin, Ice Blue from Dharma, and Lilac from Dharma. Another dress, I'm going to use Turquoise from Dharma, Coral Pink from Dharma, and Moss Green from Dharma. And then on the final dress, I'm going to use Sky Blue from Dharma, Lime Pop from Dharma, and Hot Hibiscus from Dharma. I sped up the painting process for the additional dresses quite a bit, but if you'd like to see it a little bit slower, you can click the settings icon and slow down the video. You can also speed it up if you'd like to go through this a little faster than I've already set it to go. Okay, so I'm almost finished painting the very last dress, and after 24 hours, I'll start rinsing. Since there wasn't a whole lot of dye on each one of the dresses, I gave them a quick rinse in cold water, and then on a few of the dresses, I put a little bit of Blue Dawn dish detergent in my hand and kind of scrubbed out the lines that I drew on with washable marker. I wanted to make sure those came off in the washing machine. Then I put the dresses, along with a little bit of Dharma's textile detergent, into my washing machine and washed them using a hot water cycle. And after the dresses were washed and dried, this is what they look like. Okay, so what do you guys think? These are the 3 size medium dresses, so they were the 3 dresses that I painted in the middle of the video. I think they turned out really cute. I'm really happy with them. I started to get really concerned that the washable marker wasn't going to wash all the way out, but it did really well, and that made me very happy. I'm also really happy that I didn't accidentally get any dye anywhere else on the dress. I ended up painting these on my kitchen table just to make sure they didn't accidentally come in contact with any excess dye that I had anywhere in my tie-dye space. You guys know how far little bits of dye can travel, and I wanted to make sure that nothing got on the white area. I also wasn't too concerned about painting these on my kitchen table because they weren't soaked in soda ash. So the only place where the soda ash was mixed in with the dye. And neither one of those came in contact with the actual table. This is the size small dress, which was the first dress that I painted, and the size large dress, which was the last dress that I painted. And I really like these too. By the way, I didn't really pick the color combinations. My aunt sent me a list of the colors that she wanted me to use on the dresses. I think she did a great job though choosing colors. I really like all of her color choices. So hopefully you found this video helpful if you've ever thought about painting on a shirt or on a dress or using dye in an alternate way other than just for liquid dye or ice dye. It's important to remember too that you don't have to actually add in the soda ash. You can go ahead and soak your shirts or your items in soda ash solution before. Then you can go ahead and either allow them to dry out or paint them while they're damp and use dye that's been thickened but that hasn't had the soda ash added in. If you're doing a larger project, that's probably a better idea. That way you can mix your dye up and then use it over the course of several hours instead of having to use it immediately like I did. One of the advantages of using dye to paint with instead of fabric paint is that it doesn't get stiff. If you've ever used fabric paint, you kind of know what I'm talking about. It will harden on the shirt or the item and be a little bit less flexible. They both have their purpose, but if you want a garment that is really nice and soft, dye might be a good option for you. You also don't have to heat set the dye. You do with some of the fabric paint. So hopefully this video has inspired you to try to think outside the box and think of some new ideas and ways to use your Procyon fiber reactive dyes. And if you've enjoyed the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.